How do you each define feminism, PXIE?
She has not actually defined it.
I'll have you go first.
We're using basically the working definition that we said earlier before.
No, I'm asking for yours.
Basically, again, feminism is super duper broad. The way I personally would describe it would be the movement / ideology of trying to create a system where men and women have equality or like equal opportunities, essentially.
So if the system was patriarchal, in order to achieve equality, you would need to dismantle patriarchal systems, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then my definition of feminism is the movement towards egalitarianism and the dismantling of patriarchy follows, right?
Yeah, it does follow.
So then you basically utilize my definition of feminism.
Well, that's why we agreed in the beginning. I said, yeah, let's use that definition.
Yeah, but saying let's use it doesn't mean you agree with it.
It's because I'm not, and I know you're like, oh, you're obfuscating, like you're making this so much more complicated than it is.
No, I'm fine with that if it has a point and it's not actually obfuscation.
Okay. The reason why I'm not being super strict with the definition of feminism is because since feminism is such a broad topic, somebody can easily bring up, I don't know if this will happen, I can't think of one from the top of my head, but if another definition is brought up, that also makes sense. I would be open to using that definition as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm just holding you to some kind of standard we can operate off of.
Yeah.
I understand it could be broader than the standard.
Yeah.
But at least the standard gives us something to talk around, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so whether it's mine or yours, so I wanted to move past the you're granting me mine into this is a definition that at its core you kind of agree is also true. Okay, so that would be the definition.
Do we live in a patriarchy?
Yeah, I'd say we do.
Yeah, otherwise what could she dismantle?
And what is, did we define patriarchy earlier? What is a patriarchy? What is the patriarchy?
Basically, the patriarchy is, I don't even say necessarily like a system of governance, but a system of like societal structure where men have more power on the basis of being men.
Men have more power on the basis of being men.
Yes, like basically being a male in the system by virtue or whatever, because of the way that society views it, grants you with automatically some level of power more or respect more.
Is this all men or some men?
Oh, that's a good question. I kind of want some men, honestly. Because even if you try to argue that, like, oh no, men in general, or even if we say men in general, the point being is that there are certain men out there who do not meet the standards of what it means to be a man, like societally, and as a return, they're treated very, very badly, looked down upon, like, at the same level of, like, women, essentially. That's why I would argue that there are some extreme cases like that.
Yeah, I don't think patriarchy has anything to do with status, so my definition is just of the father. So this just means that men are in charge of shit. They're in charge of something.
Yeah.
That would be a patriarchal system, that men are in charge of it.
Yeah. I think...
so status itself, to me, how society views it, I don't actually care about. I don't actually care about the entailment of the societal viewing of men having more or less status because... arguably, right now, I would say that men are not looked at as having more status than women in this society. Would you?
I think in certain areas.
Like?
I think men, basically, women can exhibit some of the same behaviors men have, and they'll be looked down upon it, essentially.
Like?
Straightforwardness, assertiveness, just domineering behavior.
But they're looked down on often by other women for that.
And men, both.
Yeah, but I mean, men and women also look down on men if they're not exhibiting proper masculine qualities.
Yeah, I agree, but...
why would that be patriarchal?
It's patriarchal because it puts men in an inherent, like, benefit for acting in ways that are manly.
You haven't demonstrated the benefit. You just said that if women don't act like women, they get there's a punishment for it, but the same with men.
The benefit is that if, what is it? the benefit is basically they're more likely to be promoted, to be, essentially put into power because they're acting like men. That's the point. If I'm a woman, let's say, you know how we were talking about human characteristics
give me a
earlier?
demonstration of that.
Okay, easy. Let's take a man and a woman, and let's say they're both, trying to get this like CEO position, whatever. They're trying to apply for it, and they're getting interviewed by basically they're interviewing the subordinates to see like who's better, blah 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 blah. If the woman is as assertive as the guy is or has been towards her subordinates, they're usually seen as like bitchy, or they're usually seen as like a pain in the ass or whatever. While the guy is more likely to be seen as, no, he's just assertive. He just knows what he wants. So based on this, the woman is more likely to be like penalized, to not get that position, to be looked down upon, because she is exhibiting the same attribute that the man is, which is being assertive or domineering.
But that doesn't demonstrate, because we view men and women a certain way based on their ontology and the physicality and the way that they actually operate, that there's no advantages that are equal to this advantage you perceive in the CEO aspect to women. And if that is the case, then the idea that men have certain advantages and women have other certain advantages still wouldn't make it patriarchal if we're looking at status.
Well, first of all, can you give me an example? And then second of all...
Yeah, let me give you tons of examples where women's status is very helpful to them just by being women, where it's not for men.
Before, I said first of all, but then second of all...
well, can we do one at a time so we don't get bogged down in this? We have to answer 5 points at a time. Let's do one at a time.
They're intertwined. Because
Okay.
I was going to say, like, second of all, even in cases where, a woman has an advantage because she's acting womanly versus a man who's, has an advantage because he's acting like manly or whatever, the argument here is just not, are there advantages to being a woman or a man? There are advantages to being both. The one is, which one is more likely to put you in a position of power?
Okay, but when you're talking about status, you agree with me that power comes in many forms.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if we're talking about status, don't you think that it's a very powerful position for women to be in, to be the default when it comes to custodial agreements of children?
Yes, but it's usually not because they're women. It's usually because they're the primary caretaker.
Nope, it's traditionally just been because they're women. In fact, there's laws which governed this for years and years. Just because woman, instant custody.
Because women
and
were
even
seen as a
right
primary
now,
caretaker.
that's carried on the same exact way that it is in the CEO idea. So this is going to be case specific. Some men aren't going to look at women applying for a CEO job and say, oh, she's being a bitch, therefore she's gone. They might prefer assertive women in those positions. Some men, maybe not. And maybe it's the majority of those some men who don't want that assertiveness that they would prefer in a man. Great. Okay, so maybe that gives men an advantage in that particular criteria. However, the status of women is also advantageous in other areas. So I'm not confident that using your definition of status proves patriarchy if women are advantaged in different areas.
Okay. I don't think... Well, here's a few things. The first one I want to ask you is if you could give me a specific study so that I can look at specifically of... like in recent era.
Here's one we can agree on easily. For the same crime, including violent crimes, women get lesser sentences than men.
Yes, absolutely. That is an advantage.
It's an advantage,
yes,
massive advantage.
I said that's an advantage, yes. And again, as I said before, there are certain advantages women have under the patriarchy.
That would fall under status, yes? That your status merely as being a woman
but that's because,
is assisting you?
Yeah, I agree with that. But that's also because women are viewed as weaker. They're not viewed as much as a threat. They are viewed, it's a status that is lower. It's essentially saying like, oh, I view you the same way I would view like a cat trying to like claw me. Like, you're not that much of a threat, so I'm not going to punish you as much because, who the fuck cares? You're just a woman. So that is, maybe it's an advantage towards women, but it's fucked up and it shouldn't be that way.
Who cares? It's still a status which is enjoyed and a privilege by women.
But it's not a status over men.
Okay, first of all, again, here's our conflicting definitions. When you say status, right? I say patriarchies of the father, men are in charge. Okay, that would be a patriarchal system. Women often, as judges in these cases, hand down lighter sentences just like the men do. This is not a purely male phenomenon at all. So how could it be
it's
patriarchal?
A societal, what is it? Again, it's patriarchal because the view is that men should be taken more seriously than women. They are.
By even including women.
Yes, I'm not.
So how could that be
What do you mean?
patriarchy?
Why again?
Is the patriarchy brainwashing them to believe that?
No, unironically.
Yes, of
unironically,
course.
yeah, no.
Yeah, of course.
Women do uphold the patriarchy. I've never disagreed with this. The whole idea.
I think that women are upholding the idea that women are less of a threat. I think that women uphold the idea that women deserve to have custody. I think that women use the stats, including feminists specifically use stats all the time, everywhere.
I'm sorry.
Hang on, let me finish my argument.
Okay.
Saying that men are hyperpredatory. Because they're hyperpredatory, this is why they're viewed as being predators. They should be viewed this way. Women should get lighter sentences. They don't do as much crime as men do. Women enforce this narrative, not men.
I think both men and women
enforce more women.
This narrative.
I think feminists.
We literally had a conversation for the past 2 hours where you were telling me how men, if they decided to go and kill everybody or kill all women, they could because they have the monopoly on power.
So?
You are enforcing the same patriarchy that now you're saying, oh no, it's women who are actually doing this, not me.
I'm giving you a logical argumentation that rights themselves come only because men allow women to have those rights. Do I think that the default is that men will be in charge indefinitely in some capacity? Yes. But your definition is status.
Yeah.
Status. So men could conceivably be in charge and women still have a higher status, which would make it, in your definition, not a patriarchy.
No, I think, power and status are often interlinked.
Not always.
More often than not, though. When you are...
Prove it.
Okay. Who is the most powerful person in the world right now?
I don't know.
I'd argue the President of the United States.
Yeah, and that would be an argue, yeah, I guess.
Historically speaking.
I wouldn't say that that's a high status job anymore, though.
Okay, well, we'll agree to disagree then.
What did you think when Trump was in office that the presidency was a really high status job?
Yeah, I think it still was. I think literally being the president of the United States.
And who's about to be Kamala?
Is probably it's the most. I would argue.
And is Kamala right now about to be the president? Possibly.
We'll find out.
But if she is, then is it a matriarchy then? Because she's at the highest status.
As again, I stated before, it would be like a general system. Just having one CEO, one woman CEO, one woman president, one woman in power doesn't necessarily dismantle the entire system. Yeah, no, it would or similar. It would have to be pretty close.
I don't understand how come tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of women can enjoy the status and privilege of custodial agreements, getting lighter sentences, having their doors open for them, making sure that all of their meals are bought for them, making sure that society in and of itself caters to them. In a way that they do not cater back to society. They're not doing the most dangerous jobs in the world. The mortality rates inside of men's workforce versus women are astronomical because women can't do the jobs men can do. Seems like you have a much higher status in society than men do. We're viewed as interchangeable, expendable widgets.
If women really had like that same level of status that men do, you would expect that to carry out more in the workforce too. You'd expect them to have, let's say, like more positions of power. You'd expect them to have more positions of governance. You'd expect it to be like around similar numbers, but for some reason we don't get that.
Yeah, because you don't.
What do you mean? It's the same level of status.
Because you don't do anything of status.
What do you?
Well, how much status are you going to have as a kindergarten teacher? You don't do anything anybody gives you status for.
We're talking about women and men who are similar, if not the exact same qualifications, applying to the same exact jobs and having the men still being picked more.
Oh, no. Is that so? Do they enjoy, on some kind of hiring status quo, the fact that they don't get fucking pregnant, and so they won't have to leave their job for 9 months out of the fucking year, and they won't have to stay home and take extended vacations, which is what women demand and men don't? From an employer standpoint, male or female, Makes sense, doesn't it? That's not a status symbol.
It doesn't. It really doesn't make sense because one, you're presupposing that every woman who applies to the job ever is going to get fucking pregnant. Then second of all, for the society that I'm advocating for, both men and women would get equal levels of paternity and maternity leave.
Oh, great. That's nice, but unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way equally. Hang on, my turn. I just listened. My turn to respond. So just so you know, if you are running a company which is hiring a lot of men and women, you would probably just make general policies, not individualistic policies. You and I can both agree that only females can get pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Only females can get pregnant. No males ever can get pregnant, ever.
Can I? I don't want to derail, but...
No males can become pregnant.
You can answer the question. You can answer.
Okay. Do you consider a person with XY chromosomes male or female?
No. You can be a male and have a double X chromosome depending on your biology. But you can still be a male. You only have two.
How do you define male?
That would be somebody who follows the typified pathway for female or male. So your organs, your body can only have X amount of organs. Those organs are going to be, even in chimeras, this is true. You're only going to have one reproductive pathway that's viable. And so you can determine the sex that way.
So you agree that, I'm just curious. I'm just generally curious. So there are people who have XY chromosomes that can get pregnant.
Yeah, so what?
So they're women or men?
No. Again, didn't I just say that it had nothing to do with chromosomes? Repeat.
No, that's why I'm clarifying.
Stop. Repeat back to me what I told you.
You said...
What is a male and a female from my definition?
You said it depends on the reproductive status, essentially.
No,
that
that's not what I said. So let me try it again. You can only, as a human being, have one of two viable reproductive pathways.
That's why literally...
I didn't say reproductive status.
Okay.
Because there's women without uteruses who are still females.
Okay. Sorry for
It's important that we make this distinction.
Okay.
And do you know why it's important to make this distinction? Because there's women who obviously can't have children, but they're still quite female.
Okay, so it's a reproductive pathway.
Yes, it's the one of two reproductive pathways your body is capable of going down. Okay. And there's only two.
Okay, and so, I'm just curious, and because of the whole trans athlete, well, they're not trans, but because
you mean the female?
Huh?
You mean the female athlete?
Yeah, and that there were a bunch of people.
Yeah, that was a female.
Okay, cool, awesome. I'm glad we agree.
Yeah, I mean, I used it as a great way to bash on the T's because I like to do that, but yes, that was a female. Okay,
cool.
So, one of two reproductive pathways which are available. No men can become pregnant. And let's assume for a second that because you're like a blue-haired social justice lunatic, that there's 10 who could, 10 males or 20 or 200 males or even 2,000. We could say with great confidence that almost every company on planet Earth is never going to have to deal with one.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so if that is the case, then we can reduce this to females only are going to be the carriers of the children. So if you are in charge of a company and you are setting a standard for who you want to hire, right, why would you not set the standard for people who are going to require less in the way of leaving the company for extended periods of time based on pregnancy, based on this, based on that?
I understand what you're trying to say. I just think fundamentally, I would focus more on who has more qualifications, or basically who I believe to be more qualified to lead.
Yeah, I mean, but who cares what you personally would like? Can envision from the employer's standpoint, you're in charge of 500 employees with a revolving door.
And I think from the employer standpoint, you can make generalizations about gender, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're hiring the best person per se if you're making those generalizations on gender.
Join us over at the crucible.video. Crucible.video, become a member over there. $15 a month for access to it all.